Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron, I hope you're having a great day or night in Jesus. Thank you so much for being with us. I do invite you to check out our other videos and subscribe and hit the bell notification. We're looking today at biblical psychology and what the Bible has to say about the mind and what the Bible has to say about the heart, about thoughts, about conscience. It says a lot about all those things, about the thinking processes of man, and then how did we become sentient? What separates us from beast? Because we're in the image of God. That's the biggest thing. And Genesis 1 and 2 goes into that. And then the shame culture that started in Genesis chapter 3 with the fall. And then you have the flood and the things that led up to that, man's sinful nature. So the Bible, there's so much about biblical psychology in the Bible. So thanks for being here. We're looking today at the guilt of success in Western countries. And so a lot of the West was built on some form of Christianity. I use that term loosely. We could say it was built on the Bible, morals. Some people call it Judeo-Christian values, these type things. And so it was built with the Ten Commandments, that are behind the Supreme Court to this day, America, and different Supreme Court things. I think it was Trinity with somebody in 1893-ish, somewhere in that neighborhood, said America's a Christian nation, just a lot of things. And so Story has a book on that. He's one of the old Supreme Court justices from the 19th century. And so it just seems like there was prosperity in so many ways that followed this. Now, people would point to the fact you had serfdom, you had the divine right of kings, you had other things, and like the American Revolution was against those things. They would be like, well, all men are created equal. People shouldn't be kings just because of lineage, just because of inheritance. We should try to put the wisest, the philosopher kings among us, going all the way back to Plato, even though I know that's not a Christian concept. They were saying that. And so But you had a lot of biblical morality. It's very difficult to study late 18th century America, let's say from 1750 to 1800 and even beyond, and not bump into Christianity everywhere. It doesn't mean everybody was Christians, but it just so predominated society. And it's because of the Pilgrims. I mean, America was built on that. With the rise of the Pilgrims and all that, we understand pre-Pilgrim people, indigenous people, not just Jamestown, not just the Spanish explorers, but indigenous people. But, marking history, 1620, this type thing. And so it built a lot, not just here, but in the West in general. And so it's a fascinating study in psychology that when people tend to have a lot, there's certain things that play on our God-given conscience. And so sometimes it's power, sometimes it's pride, sometimes people begin to think it's because the Christians had white skin or something like that is what made them successful. And my rejoinder to that is people are just ignorant of history. Westerners didn't build the Great Wall of China, for example. And you look at Oriental architecture, it's absolutely incredible. And certain civilizations in Africa, especially South America, Central America, some of the things that still exist that look like ziggurats, and the Incas and the Olmec people. So, be that as it may, but one of the factors that enters into multi-generational success occasionally is a guilt complex, that people begin to say, well, we don't deserve this. And they begin to feel guilty about their ancestors, and they tend to emphasize the failures of their ancestors rather than their successes. Now, let's just be honest. We're not in the millennium. We're not in the New Jerusalem. Jesus has not returned yet. So at best, We're going to be living in a fallen world with 2 good angels for every demon that's out there, Satan being called the little g god of this world, with Christians, real Christians, being salt and light, and people trying to live by the word of God. This is just, in a sense, a best case scenario, even though, yes, I do realize there have been quite halcyonic and panaceic cultures that did not have Christianity in them. They've been some cultures that had a high range of certain types of morality, and I'm thinking of Confucianism, but not limited to Confucianism, as C.S. Lewis has shown in some of his books. And so with this, going back to the guilt complex, then that can be easily manipulated. That then you have the haves and the have-nots, and sometimes the haves realize that they did not work to have, at least not to the extent that they've got, and there's some natural born advantages. And so this leads to a guilt complex, and then the guilt complex can be manipulated by certain forces, and we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, spiritual wickedness in high places, and different philosophies, and even economic and even unscrupulous people to transfer power from one sector to another sector. And so this is a dramatic psychological phenomenon that you can study, and it's very easily observable. And there are several factors. Human nature is multifaceted. Jesus, in a couple different places, Matthew and Mark, listed 14 natures of the heart. Paul in Genesis 5 lists 18 facets of the sinful nature. And so Romans 1 lists, 23? 2 Timothy 3 of the end time lists 19, I think it is. All these are facets of fallen sinful nature. And so we're just looking at a guilt complex. Now, just reading a study too that plays along with this, and it was done by, I think his name was Standridge or something like that. And let me just go into it quickly. They were trying to teach monkeys a complex task on one island, and it took them several months. Well, then when they went to the next island, using the exact same teaching methods, it took a little less time. When they went to another island, it took a little less time. Well, once they went through hundreds of islands that are inhabited by the same monkey species, genus of monkey, that the monkeys went from taking several months to learning the task to learning it almost immediately. Now, this correlates, and I know there's pushback in the academic world about this study, but I was studying the study, and it seems to have some validity, some fascinating, conclusive validity to it. That they started in the UK, I believe it was, and showed one of these pictures that takes a very long time to differentiate what it is. The old famous ink blot, it's like, what is that? And then after you look at it for a while, the picture comes out. And so in the UK, it took on average 40 minutes at the beginning for somebody to figure out this picture. Well, after going through several dozens of countries, by the time they got to the last country, people could look at it and figure it out almost immediately. And so it seems like the idea of Zeitgeist, and I don't know if this has to do with demonic spirits or if there's some other phenomenon going on, some unanimity of human nature. But you find it like in Noah's day, that everybody except Noah and his family have evil imaginations and violence. Which, if the book of Jasher to be believed, which I doubt it. I know it's mentioned in the Bible, but I'm not sure. It's not inspired, let's just put it that way. It's a fascinating phenomenon. So this collective guilt can be manipulated in such a way to disempower in a negative way, because sometimes disempowerment is maybe a good thing. And we won't go into all of the ins and outs of that. So God bless. We just want everybody to prosper and be in health, even as Jesus prospers our souls. God bless. We'll talk with you later. Oh, check out the other videos in this series. I think it's under our Worldview playlist. It may be under a couple other playlists too. God bless. We'll see you. Bye-bye.